Hey guys, tonight we are tiptoeing back through the mists of time, not to dodge shurikens, though there might be a few whizzing past your ears, metaphorically speaking, but to find a pocket of impossible calm amidst utter chaos. Picture this: you're in feudal Japan. Cherry blossoms are probably falling, looking picturesque against a backdrop of, oh, say, a burning village just over the hill. Swords clash, honor is everything, and life is often brutally short. Amidst all this, certain warriors are meticulously raking sand. Sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? You're probably thinking, samurai gardening. How does that even compute? And frankly, if you were dropped into the Sengoku period with your current sensibilities, you probably wouldn't survive the first Tuesday. It was a tough gig. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always lovely to know who's out there listening. In fact, drop a comment below with where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's fascinating to see our little community of history sleep enthusiasts spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gentle hum of that fan, or perhaps the profound silence of your room, is already a universe away from the world you're now stepping into. Imagine the air around you in feudal Japan. Sometimes it's sharp and cold, carrying the scent of distant snows from the mountains, or the clean fragrance of pine from a temple grove. Other times, it's thick, heavy with the humidity of summer, the smell of damp earth, and yes, sometimes the unmistakable, acrid tang of smoke from a recent fire, or the faint metallic whisper of blood not yet washed away by the rain. You breathe it in, this complex atmosphere of life and strife. You are in a land of exquisite, almost heartbreaking beauty, where the landscape itself seems to have been painted by a master's hand, yet it's also a stage for terrifying, relentless brutality. It's a place where the rustle of expensive silk worn by a court noble and the harsh rasp of a sword being drawn from its lacquered scabbard are equally familiar sounds, often heard in unnervingly close succession. This is feudal Japan, a period stretching over many centuries. But let's allow our focus to drift, to settle gently, like dust motes in a sunbeam, around the time when the samurai class wasn't just a part of society, but its very backbone, its driving force. Think from the Kamakura period onwards, which historians mark as beginning around 1185. This was a pivotal era. It wasn't just about warriors and their codes, it was also when Zen Buddhism, a unique school of Mahayana Buddhism, having made its long, patient journey from India through the vast landscapes of China, finally arrived and began to weave itself into the fabric of Japanese culture. Imagine those first monks, carrying precious sutras and even more precious understanding, undertaking journeys that would make our modern travel complaints about lost luggage or flight delays seem rather quaint. They probably had some very interesting travel stories, involving considerably less legroom and far more existential peril than even the most notorious budget airline today. And you, a presence in this tumultuous world, are searching for a moment of stillness, a quiet pool in a rushing river. This is no easy feat. Your social media feed, were such a thing to exist in this era, wouldn't be filled with cat videos or brunch photos. It would be an unending scroll of shifting allegiances between powerful warlords, rumors of impending battles, news of betrayals, and perhaps, tucked in between, an announcement for a poetry contest at the local shrine, because even in chaos, art finds a way. The samurai, these iconic warriors, were the undisputed influencers, the rock stars of their age, though their brand of fame came with a much stricter code of conduct, the unyielding principles of Bushido, and a significantly higher occupational hazard of sudden, violent cancellation from the world of the living. They were steeped in this way of the warrior, a complex tapestry of ideals emphasizing unwavering honor, absolute courage in the face of death, and fierce loyalty to one's lord. Yet, beneath the layers of exquisitely crafted armor, behind the intimidating glare of the Mempo mask designed to strike fear into enemies. There was a human spirit, a mind, a heart, that yearned for something more profound than just the adrenaline of the next skirmish or the glory of a successful campaign. How do you maintain your center, your very sanity, when the world around you is a relentless, howling typhoon of uncertainty and violence? This is precisely where the Zen garden begins to murmur its ancient, soothing truths. It's so much more than just a visually pleasing arrangement of natural elements. A pretty patch of land to admire? Oh no. That would be like saying a masterful symphony is just a collection of nice sounds. The Zen garden, for those who understood its language, was a microcosm of the entire universe, compressed into a manageable, contemplative space. It was a practical tool for deep meditation, a tangible, three-dimensional expression of profound philosophical concepts, and perhaps, let's be honest, a highly sophisticated and aesthetically pleasing way to deal with immense stress that didn't involve yelling at your underlings or, in their case, perhaps taking out your frustrations on a particularly uncooperative training dummy. The very idea of a warrior, an individual whose entire profession, whose entire identity is built around conflict, strategy, and the grim reality of ending lives, then turning around to meticulously tend to the delicate growth of moss or to spend hours contemplating the perfect placement of a single, weathered stone, might seem like an irreconcilable contradiction. It's like imagining a battle-hardened Navy SEAL taking up competitive flower arranging. A bit jarring, perhaps. Yet, it was often this very embrace of seeming opposites that forged the ideal samurai. The warrior who was as adept with a brush for calligraphy as with a blade. The mainstream historical fact to tuck away for tonight is that the Kamakura period, lasting from 1185 to 1333, was a transformative time. It didn't just witness the consolidation of samurai governance and the rise of the shogunate, it was also the period when Zen Buddhism was significantly introduced from China and began its deep and lasting spread throughout Japan, profoundly influencing the mindset and practices of these elite warriors. You might imagine yourself, after a particularly grueling day of training, hours spent practicing sword katas until your arms feel like lead and your legs tremble with fatigue, seeking out the roji. This is the garden path, often simple, even rustic, designed to cleanse the mind as you walk, leading perhaps to a tea house for a formal ceremony, or just to a quiet, unadorned pavilion built for no other purpose than to sit and gaze upon the garden. The deliberate crunch of carefully chosen gravel under your gaita, the traditional wooden sandals, isn't just a sound, it's a metronome for your thoughts. Each step a gentle nudge, a reminder to be fully present in that moment. No doom scrolling through terrifying news feeds here to distract or numb the mind. The preferred form of numbness might come from a little too much warm sake the previous evening. But the garden offers a clarity, not an escape. The incredible, almost obsessive meticulousness required to maintain these gardens wasn't purely for show. It was a profound discipline in itself. Consider this if you can cultivate the unwavering focus needed to rake swirling patterns in white sand to represent the vastness of the ocean, ensuring every line is perfect, every pebble in its place, undisturbed by haste or a wandering mind. Then perhaps, just perhaps, you can also maintain that diamond-sharp focus on the battlefield when the chaos is deafening. The stakes are ultimate, and things are considerably more dynamically kinetic. Now, here's a little something scholars still turn over in their minds. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for the samurai class embracing Zen Buddhism was its sophisticated philosophical insights into the nature of existence, impermanence, and the ego, or its more immediately practical applications in fostering martial discipline, mental resilience, and a calm, almost detached acceptance of death, a vital asset in their line of work. It's quite likely, as with many such deep historical currents, that it was a confluence of both. Zen offered a profound spiritual framework that also happened to equip you with an incredibly effective psychological toolkit for warfare. It's a bit like how some people today dive into the depths of quantum physics to understand the universe, and others just want a smartphone that works faster. The profound and the practical, often walking hand in hand. And for a quirky little tidbit to ponder as you drift, while our modern image of a Zen garden is often one of extreme austerity, those striking compositions of rock, meticulously raked sand or gravel, and subtle moss, some of the earlier Japanese gardens, before Zen aesthetics fully crystallized and became dominant, drew their inspiration from vibrant, almost fantastical descriptions of Buddhist Pure Land paradises. These initial paradise gardens could sometimes feature more overtly symbolic, even colorful and elaborate elements, designed to be literal, earthly representations of heavenly realms. Imagine a classic Zen garden, but with a touch more celestial bling, perhaps a shimmering, quartz-veined rock explicitly named to represent the mythical Mount Meru, the cosmic axis, or a pond intentionally shaped like a sacred Sanskrit character. The later, more globally renowned Zen style that we are gently exploring tonight truly distilled these impulses down to their bare, potent, and deeply resonant essence. It marked a subtle but significant shift from attempting to replicate an external, imagined paradise to cultivating an internal, directly experienced one. So you stand there, or perhaps you sit, adopting the formal Seiza position, knees neatly folded, if you're feeling particularly traditional and your 21st century hamstrings are in a forgiving mood. You gaze upon the garden. It doesn't clamor for your attention. It doesn't flash or beep or send you urgent notifications. It simply is. And in its quiet, profound being, it extends in silent invitation for you to simply be as well. What a wonderfully radical concept. Then, and even now, the swirling feudal chaos, the ambitious scheming of rival lords, the ever-present shadow of potential war, all of that is still undeniably there. Just beyond the unassuming bamboo fence or the earthen wall of the garden, perhaps even audible as a distant drum or a raised voice. But within this carefully conceived and lovingly maintained space, there exists a different kind of order, a different kind of strength. It is the quiet power of stillness, the deep well of contemplation, the extraordinary ability to find the reflection of the entire cosmos in a single dewdrop on a blade of grass, or to sense the age of the earth in the silent, stoic presence of a moss-covered stone. It's a long, slow, deep breath in a world that all too often demands you hold your breath in fearful suspense or warrior's exertion. The journey to understand how these formidable samurai managed to balance the brutal art of war with the gentle, mindful art of the garden is, in essence, a journey into the very heart of a complex, enduring, and endlessly fascinating culture. You try to consciously smooth out the lingering anxieties of your day, just as a Zen monk centuries ago might have smoothed the pure white sand of the Karsansi dry garden, aiming for that perfect, undisturbed ripple, a silent testament to a mind at peace. That mind at peace, the one you're aiming for as you smooth the imaginary sand with your focused intention, wasn't just a happy accident for the samurai of feudal Japan. It was a hard-won prize, a state of being often clutched precariously in a life defined by its violent, chaotic polar opposite. You're trying to maintain this inner calm, this ripple-free surface of the mind, while the world outside your personal space, and sometimes, distressingly, inside it, is a maelstrom of obligations, dangers, and intense social pressures. Imagine the sheer weight of expectation. You are a samurai. Your primary role, your very identity in the eyes of society, is that of a warrior. You're expected to be fiercely loyal to your daimyo, your feudal lord, ready to follow his commands without question, even if it means riding into almost certain death. You're expected to be a paragon of courage, to face injury and oblivion with a stoicism that borders on the superhuman. Failure could mean not just personal disgrace, but ruin for your entire family. The pressure was immense, a constant thrum beneath the surface of daily life. And daily life itself. It was rarely simple. When not engaged in active warfare, which was frequent enough to keep everyone on their toes, there were still the constant undercurrents of political intrigue, rivalries between clans, the potential for sudden betrayal, and the ever-present duty to maintain your martial skills at their peak. Your typical day planner, if you were a samurai with, say, some administrative responsibilities on top of your warriorly duties, might have a rather eclectic to-do list, early morning rigorous sword practice. Focus on not inadvertently lopping off own ear. Mid-morning review reports on rice yields from the western province. Lunch quick, functional. Afternoon. Perhaps a session of Zen meditation, or, if the mood strikes, composing a death poem just in case. Late afternoon archery practice. Evening patrol duty, or if you're unlucky, participation in a diplomatic sake drinking session with a potentially treacherous neighboring lord. Before sleep, if energy permits and the moon is right, perhaps some quiet contemplation in the garden. Maybe prune that errant azalea. It's what you might call a demanding schedule, making today's complaints about back-to-back Zoom meetings seem a tad less dramatic. This wasn't merely about balancing work and life in the modern sense. It was a far more profound and perilous balancing act, a war art existence balance. Perhaps in where dropping one of the carefully juggled balls could have significantly more permanent consequences than just a missed deadline. How, then, did these individuals navigate such a razor's edge? How did they cultivate the serenity to appreciate the subtle beauty of a single camellia blossom when their hands were equally, if not more, familiar with the cold, hard feel of a sword's hilt? The answer, in part, lies in a deeply ingrained societal ideal that began to truly flourish. Especially as Japan moved into slightly more stable, though still samurai-dominated periods like the Edo period that followed the major wars. This ideal is encapsulated in the term Bunbu Ryodo Wenwu Liang, Dao, which translates roughly as the dual way of the literary and martial arts. This wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was a guiding principle suggesting that the complete samurai was not only a formidable fighter but also a person of culture, refinement, and intellectual depth. The sword and the brush, the battlefield and the tea room were not seen as contradictory but as complementary facets of a single, well-polished soul. So, the samurai's engagement with practices like Zen meditation, calligraphy shodo, poetry like haiku or waka, the intricate tea ceremony chinoyu, and, of course, the art of garden design and maintenance, wasn't just a hobby or a way to kill time between skirmishes. These pursuits were considered integral to their development as warriors and as human beings. The intense focus required for calligraphy, making each stroke perfect and imbued with spirit, mirrored the focus needed in a sword duel. The calm, ritualized movements of the tea ceremony fostered a sense of presence and respect, qualities vital in both social interactions and on the battlefield. And the garden. The garden was perhaps the most holistic training ground of all. Think about it, you're there in your small, carefully enclosed garden space. The chaos of the warring states, the Sengoku Jidai or Age of the Country at War, might be raging just beyond the walls. But here, you cultivate a different kind of engagement. The selection and placement of stones, as we touched upon, require immense thought and an intuitive feel for balance and harmony. The same intuition that might guide you in a complex military maneuver. Pruning a tree is an act of decisive, precise removal, not unlike a well-aimed sword cut. You remove what is weak or obstructive to allow the essential form and vitality to flourish. Tending to moss, encouraging its slow, patient spread across a rock or patch of earth, teaches humility and an appreciation for the beauty of age and impermanence, a crucial understanding for someone whose life could end at any moment. Remember that quirky tidbit about early paradise gardens? Well, as Zen matured its influence, some samurai developed highly personal, almost eccentric interpretations of Zen within their private garden spaces. blending its core tenets with older Shinto reverence for nature spirits or even personal folk beliefs. You might find a fearsome, battle-scarred warrior who, in the privacy of his garden, had a specific, unadorned stone he considered a personal guardian, or who arranged fallen leaves in a pattern that held a secret, personal meaning, a quiet dialogue with the universe that was entirely his own. These weren't for public consumption, but deeply individual spiritual practices. This cultivation of the inner landscape was crucial. The samurai sought a state of mushin, or no mind, a mind free from anger, fear, or ego, capable of reacting instantly and intuitively. This was as vital for perfectly executing a kata with a sword as it was for perceiving the subtle needs of a garden. The societal pressure was to be effective, to be strong, but the personal discipline was to be centered. The garden became a sanctuary where this centering could occur, a physical manifestation of the internal effort to reconcile the warrior's fierce yang energy with the contemplative, receptive yin. It was a place to process the brutalities of their profession, to find a measure of peace that wasn't dependent on external circumstances. Naturally, with any ideal, there's always the question of how consistently it was lived. Scholars continue to discuss the extent to which the samurai's embrace of Zen philosophy and these refined artistic pursuits represented a genuine, deeply felt spiritual quest versus a strategically cultivated aspect of their social persona. A sophisticated performance designed to demonstrate status, control, and intellectual superiority. Were they all truly seeking enlightenment? Or were some just trying to impress the shogun with their impeccably raked gravel and their knowledge of obscure poetry? Like many things in history, the truth is probably a complex mix. There were undoubtedly those who found profound solace and wisdom in Zen and the arts, and others for whom it was more of a fashionable accomplishment, an expected part of the samurai brand. It doesn't necessarily diminish the beauty or the functional tranquility of the gardens themselves, but it adds another layer to your understanding of the men who walked them. Imagine a high-powered CEO today who publicly extols the virtues of mindfulness and has a perfectly minimalist office, but whose private motivations might be more about crushing the competition than achieving nirvana. Human nature has its enduring patterns, it seems. So, you, as this samurai, are not just a divided soul, torn between violence and peace. Instead, you are striving for integration, for a way that these seemingly disparate elements can inform and strengthen each other. The discipline of the sword arm informs the discipline of the pruning hand. The stillness found staring at a rock informs the stillness needed under enemy fire. The garden isn't an escape from your warrior self. It's a place where that self is refined, tempered, and perhaps, just perhaps, made a little more whole. It's a quiet testament to the human capacity to seek beauty and meaning even in the shadow of the sword, to cultivate a small patch of serenity while the world outside thunders with the drums of war. You take another slow breath, feeling the imaginary rake in your hands, the texture of the sand, the cool air on your skin, as you continue this journey not just through a garden, but through the very soul of the samurai. And as you continue this journey, stepping deeper not just into a physical space of raked sand and weathered stones, but into the very heart of the samurai's complex world, you begin to realize that the garden itself has a voice. It doesn't shout its messages from the treetops. Of course, that wouldn't be very zen, would it? That would be more like a town crier announcing a sale on discounted armor. Effective, perhaps, but lacking a certain subtlety. Instead, the Zen garden offers you a silent sermon, a continuous, nuanced unfolding of core Buddhist philosophies. Each element you perceive, every strategically placed rock, every meticulously raked grain of sand, every carefully selected and patiently tended plant, serves as a word, a phrase, in its profound, earthy discourse. This isn't just landscaping, it's philosophy made tangible. The first whisper you might catch on the metaphorical breeze is the principle of kanso junsu, or simplicity. This isn't about being stark or empty for the sake of it, like that minimalist apartment your friend has where you're afraid to put your drink down. It's an elegant simplicity, an elimination of the non-essential, allowing the true nature of things to shine through. In the garden, this means no fussy ornamentation, no distracting clutter. Each element is chosen with intention, and there's a sense of clarity, of everything being exactly what it needs to be, and nothing more. You see it in the unadorned surface of a smooth, dark riverstone, or the clean sweep of raked gravel. This would have resonated deeply with a samurai striving for clarity of mind in the midst of battle or complex political maneuvering. Hand in hand with Kanso walks Fukinsei Bujunchi, the principle of asymmetry or irregularity. This is a deliberate turning away from the perfect, rigid symmetry that might feel artificial or overly controlled. Zen teaches that true beauty often lies in imperfection, in the natural balance found in the asymmetrical forms of nature. A gnarled pine tree, a coastline that isn't a straight line. In the garden, you'll rarely find rocks placed in a perfect geometric pattern or plants pruned into identical globes. Instead, there's a dynamic balance, a sense of movement and life that perfect symmetry would stifle. This acceptance of imperfection, of the not quite perfect, must have been a quiet comfort in a life demanding such high standards. A reminder that wholeness can exist even with flaws. Then there's Shibumi Shibui Wei, or sometimes referred to by its adjective form. Shibui. This is a beauty that is simple, subtle, and unobtrusive. It's not flashy or ostentatious. It doesn't demand your attention. It's a quiet elegance that reveals its depth slowly. Over time, think of the subtle, earthy tones of moss and stone, the way light plays on a raked pattern, the understated beauty of a single, unopened lotus bud. It's the opposite of that one neighbor who overdoes the holiday decorations until you need sunglasses at night. The samurai, trained to observe, to be aware of subtle shifts in their environment, would have been particularly attuned to this quiet form of beauty, a respite from the often garish displays of power in the feudal world. Of course, all of this is underpinned by Shizen-Ziran, naturalness. The garden aims to look as if it grew there, crafted by nature itself, even though it's the result of meticulous human effort. The skill lies in making the human hand invisible, or at least harmonious with natural processes. It's about respecting the innate character of the materials, letting a rock express its rockness, allowing a plant to grow in a way that honors its natural form, even when guided by pruning. Achieving this kind of effortless naturalness can, ironically, be surprisingly effortful. A bit like those no-makeup looks that actually take 47 products and an hour to apply. But the samurai, through disciplined practice, understood that true mastery often looks effortless. One of the most evocative principles you'll feel, rather than just see, is Yugen Yu Xuan. This is a tricky one to translate directly. It suggests a profound, mysterious grace, a beauty that is hinted at rather than explicitly shown. It's about what is not seen, the depth that is suggested, the power of implication. A mist partially obscuring a group of rocks might evoke Yugen, making them seem like distant islands in an ethereal sea. The way a path disappears around a bend, inviting you to imagine what lies beyond, also speaks of Yugen. It's like trying to explain why a particular piece of music moves you so deeply. The explanation often falls short of the experience. If you ask the head gardener, "Excuse me, does that rock suggest a distant mountain range? Or is it a distant mountain range?" he'd probably just give you a serene, slightly pitying smile. The suggestion is the point. And speaking of serene, there's Seijaku Jingji tranquility, silence, an energized calm. This isn't a dead, empty silence, but a stillness teeming with subtle life. The hum of an insect, the rustle of leaves, the distant sound of water, or even the profound silence of your own mind settling. The garden is designed to be a haven of Seijaku, a place where the samurai could retreat from the noise and clamor of the world, to find a space for quiet contemplation and mental rejuvenation. These ideals were often shaped by towering figures in Zen history. For instance, The mainstream historical fact for you to absorb is that Muso Soseki, at 1275-1351, was an incredibly influential Zen master, a renowned poet, a gifted calligrapher, and a revolutionary garden designer. His work, particularly at important temples such as Saihoji, famously known as the Moss Temple for its stunning carpets of varied mosses, and Tenryuji in Kyoto, with its dramatic use of borrowed scenery, significantly shaped the aesthetic principles and spiritual depth we associate with Zen gardens today. He wasn't just making pretty spaces, he was crafting environments for enlightenment. Central to the Zen aesthetic, and particularly visible in its gardens, are the intertwined concepts of wabi-cha and sabi-ji. Wabi speaks to a rustic simplicity, a kind of imperfect, humble beauty found in natural, unrefined things. It's about appreciating the ordinary, finding satisfaction in simplicity. Sabi is the beauty that comes with age, the patina of time, the visible history of an object. Think of a weathered wooden gate, a stone lantern covered in ancient moss, a tea bowl with a mended crack. Together, one wabi-sabi is an appreciation of the imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete nature of existence. It's a profound counterpoint to a world obsessed with newness and perfection. And here's a quirky tidbit related to this. It's said that some Zen garden masters would intentionally include a flawed stone, perhaps one that was cracked, oddly shaped, or discolored, not despite its imperfection, but precisely because of it. This wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate teaching tool, a tangible reminder of wabi-sabi, encouraging the viewer to find beauty in the incomplete and the humble. This ties into mono no aware wu no ire, a gentle, melancholic awareness of the transience of all things, the fleeting beauty of cherry blossoms, the vibrant colors of autumn leaves just before they fall, the slow decay of wood. The garden is full of reminders that everything is impermanent. For a samurai, whose own life was often perilously transient, this wasn't a depressing thought, but a call to appreciate each moment, to live fully and authentically. Finally, underlying much of Zen garden design is the concept of kukong, often translated as emptiness or void. This isn't a nihilistic nothingness. Rather, it's the fertile void from which all things arise, the potentiality that exists before form. In the garden, you see this in the large expanses of raked sand or gravel, the empty spaces between rock groupings. This space, sometimes called majian, is not passive. It's an active, essential element that gives definition and power to the forms. It's the silence between notes that makes the music. Of course, interpreting these ancient creations isn't always straightforward. The precise symbolic meaning intended by the original designers for specific rock arrangements in famously minimalist gardens like Ryoanji in Kyoto, with its 15 stones seemingly floating in a sea of gravel, remains a subject of ongoing scholarly debate and diverse interpretation. Are they islands, mountain peaks, constellations, or simply abstract forms meant to provoke contemplation? Perhaps the lack of a single correct answer is part of their enduring power. So, as you sit in this imaginary garden, you're not just looking at rocks and sand. You're receiving a silent sermon on the nature of reality, a masterclass in mindfulness, a gentle guide to finding peace amidst chaos. Each element is a lesson, each vista an invitation to look deeper, both outward and within. The garden is a teacher, and its lessons are written in stone, whispered by the wind through bamboo, and reflected in the still surface of a water basin. That still surface of the water basin, perfectly reflecting the sky or perhaps just your own sleepy face as you gaze into its depths, doesn't maintain itself by magic, though in the profound quiet of a Zen garden, the effect can certainly feel wonderfully magical. No, behind that serene tranquility, behind every artfully placed pebble and every flawlessly raked line of shimmering sand, is a quiet hum of dedication, an unwavering focus, and a collection of rather humble, unassuming implements, the tools of stillness. And for you, the samurai, who is endeavoring to cultivate not just an aesthetically pleasing patch of earth, but also the rugged, often turbulent, landscape of your own inner world. These tools become so much more than mere objects. They transform into extensions of your own disciplined will, tangible instruments of your mindfulness. You don't just use the tool, you become one with the tool and the task. Forget your modern, noisy power tools, your leaf blowers that shatter the morning peace, or those overly complicated gadgets with more buttons than a spaceship's cockpit. The tools you'd find in the hands of a samurai tending his garden were paragons of simplicity and effectiveness, crafted from nature itself. There are no Wi-Fi connected smart rakes here, no apps to tell you when the moss needs misting. The connection is far more direct between hand, tool, earth, and spirit. The primary implements were, and often still are, fashioned from wood, resilient oak, flexible bamboo, and high-quality carbon steel for the cutting edges. The kind of steel that might also find its way into a rather more lethal type of blade. Indeed, a mainstream historical fact for you to ponder is that traditional Japanese gardening tools were frequently crafted with extraordinary skill and care by specialized artisans, who often passed down their knowledge and specific techniques through generations, using these durable natural materials to create tools that were both beautiful in their simplicity and perfectly suited to their purpose. These weren't disposable items, they were companions in a lifelong practice. Imagine yourself reaching for a rake. Not just any rake. There would be different kinds for different tasks. Perhaps a wide wooden rake with sturdy teeth, a kumide, for gathering fallen leaves from the meticulously swept pathways or for leveling larger areas of gravel. Then there are the more specialized rakes, often made of bamboo, designed for creating those mesmerizing salmon or ripple patterns in the seas of white or gray gravel that represent water in the Karasensui dry gardens. The teeth might be finely spaced for delicate, intricate lines, or further apart for broader, wave-like swells. You grip the smooth, worn wooden handle, feeling its balance in your hands. As you draw it across the gravel, it's not a mindless chore. Each pull is deliberate, a physical meditation. You feel the slight resistance of the stones. Hear the soft, rhythmic rasping sound, a sound that becomes a mantra, focusing your mind, smoothing out the mental clutter just as you smooth the physical surface before you. One misplaced line, one careless drag, and the illusion of flowing water is broken. The consequences of a sloppy raking job in a high-status garden wouldn't lead to ritual disembowelment. Probably, but it might earn you a silently eloquent, witheringly disappointed look from the head monk, or your garden-savvy daimyo, which for some samurai might have felt almost as bad. Then there are the shears. The karikomi basami, with their long wooden handles and sharp blades, are used for shaping larger shrubs and hedges, often into those soft, undulating forms that mimic distant hills or clouds. The rhythmic snip, snip, snip is a crisp, clean sound, each cut a decisive act. For more detailed work, the ueki basami, or pruning shears, are shorter, more like robust scissors, allowing for precise shaping of individual branches on pines or maples. You're not just hacking away, you're studying the plant, understanding its growth, its essence, deciding what to remove to enhance its natural beauty and health. Much like a calligrapher studies the blank page before committing ink to paper. One wrong snip on a prized black pine could take years to correct, if it could be corrected at all. The focus required is intense, immediate. There's no room for a wandering mind when you're defining the character of a tree that might have been there for centuries. And you wouldn't dream of using your precious katana for such a task, though the thought might humorously cross your mind if a particularly stubborn branch resists. Perhaps Toshiro-san should stick to the proper shears. You might muse to yourself. The chrysanthemums are starting to look genuinely terrified when he approaches with that gleam in his eye and his sword half drawn. No, the right tool for the right job is a fundamental principle. In gardening as in warfare. For weeding, you might use a small hoe, a kua, or even just your hands, for the most delicate work around fragile mosses. The act of gently pulling a weed, ensuring you get the entire root, is another lesson in thoroughness and patience. A simple bamboo broom, or hoki, is used to sweep paths, not just to clean them, but as an act of purification, of preparing the space for contemplation. Even a humble sickle, a kama, has its place for cutting back tougher grasses at the garden's edge. Each tool, when used with mindful attention, becomes an instrument for samu, that Zen concept of work practice, where everyday chores are elevated to the level of active meditation. The work itself becomes the path. A rather charming, quirky tidbit is that some highly dedicated gardeners, including samurai who poured their meditative energy into their personal Zen sanctuaries, were known to develop an almost reverential, deeply personal relationship with their favorite tools. They would meticulously clean them after every single use, oiling the blades, wiping down the handles, and sometimes were even said to give their tools names or perform small, private rituals of respect before carefully storing them away, perhaps believing that the tool itself, through long association and focused intent, absorbed some of the user's spirit or the garden's tranquil essence. It's like your favorite old pen that just feels right, except imbued with centuries of Zen practice. The very design of these tools, so perfectly evolved for their tasks, speaks volumes. However, it's interesting to note that historians and garden archaeologists sometimes debate the precise original forms and the specific evolutionary path of certain ancient Japanese gardening tools, particularly the more specialized sand rakes. Based on often fragmented archaeological evidence, ancient texts, and artistic depictions in scrolls and screens, they try to reconstruct exactly how specific intricate patterns or subtle textural effects were achieved by gardeners centuries ago, long before detailed instruction manuals or YouTube tutorials. So, as you stand in your garden, the sun warming your back, the handle of a rake or a pair of shears feeling like a natural extension of your arm, you're not just toiling, you are engaging in a profound dialogue with nature, with the principles of Zen, and with your own inner being. The focus you cultivate here, meticulously pulling weeds or shaping a branch, is the same quality of focus you bring to your swordsmanship, to your strategic thinking, to your very way of life. The patience learned in waiting for moss to grow or for a tree to mature translates into the patience needed to navigate the complexities of feudal society. The tools are simple, their purpose clear, and in their mindful use, you shape not only the garden around you but also the stillness, the resilience, and the clarity within your own samurai heart. Each sweep of the broom, each cut of the shears is a step on that path. And as you walk this metaphorical path, feeling the echo of those simple, purposeful tools in your hands, your gaze is inevitably drawn, again and again, to the most ancient, most steadfast sentinels of the Zen garden, the stones. They are the very bones of this carefully sculpted landscape, the silent, stoic heart around which the entire composition of moss, sand, and plant life revolves. The art of their selection and arrangement, a deeply respected practice known in Japanese as ishigumi shizu, is no mere rockery construction, no casual piling of boulders. It's a profound meditative endeavor, a way of listening to the deep, slow language of the earth itself. And for you, the samurai, constantly navigating the shifting tides of fortune and the ever-present shadow of impermanence, these stones offer a potent lesson in enduring strength, in the kind of unshakable calm that comes from deep-rooted stability. These aren't just any stones, mind you, not the sort you'd idly kick along a roadside path. In the Zen garden, stones are revered. They are imbued with character, with presence, sometimes even with a perceived spirit. Their symbolism is rich and multi-layered. A tall, upright stone might represent Mount Shumi or Sumeru, the mythical cosmic mountain at the center of the Buddhist universe, a symbol of cosmic order and spiritual aspiration. Lower, broader stones might evoke rolling hills or sturdy earth. Carefully chosen groups can become islands floating in a sea of raked gravel. Perhaps the legendary Harai, the mythical island paradise of the immortals, a place of eternal youth and happiness. A rather appealing concept in a world where life could be brutally short. Sometimes, specific formations are intended to represent Buddhist deities, like a triad of stones suggesting the Buddha flanked by two attendant bodhisattvas, offering a silent focus for devotion and contemplation. More fundamentally, they embody permanence, solidity, the timeless, unchanging essence of nature, a stark and grounding contrast to the fleeting beauty of blossoms or the shifting patterns of human affairs. The process of selecting these stones is an art form in itself, demanding patience, intuition, and a keen eye. You wouldn't just pop down to the local garden center and pick out a few likely candidates from a palette. Oh no. Garden designers, often Zen monks or highly skilled lay practitioners and sometimes the samurai patrons themselves, would spend enormous amounts of time considering stones, seeking them out in riverbeds, along coastlines, or on wild mountainsides. They looked for specific qualities. Shape is, of course, but also color, texture, the way lichen or moss had already begun to colonize the surface. Speaking of its age and history, each stone was considered to have a face, the side that would be most prominently viewed, a top, and a bottom. There was even a sense of the stone's internal energy, its kai, its inherent character. It was said that some stones almost called out to be chosen. The effort involved in transporting these often massive stones without the aid of modern machinery must have been Herculean, the original and very literal. CrossFit workout, requiring immense manpower, ropes, rollers, and sheer brute force, all undertaken with a kind of reverent determination. Once chosen, the placement of these stones was, if anything, even more critical. This is where the ancient wisdom passed down through generations truly came into play. A vital mainstream historical fact here is the existence of the Sakuteki Zuotingji, or records of garden making. Dating from the Heian period in the 11th century, it stands as the oldest known Japanese treatise on garden design. This remarkable text offers specific, often deeply poetic and philosophical, guidance on the art of setting stones. It famously advises that one should listen to the request of the stone, ishi noko ninishitagai, meaning to understand its inherent nature and place it where it seems to most want to be, where it looks most settled and naturally integrated into the landscape. You don't just plonk it down, you study it, you turn it. You observe how light falls on it at different times of day, how it relates to the other elements around it. A badly placed stone, according to traditional aesthetics, can look awkward, unsettled, like it arrived at the wrong philosophical party and isn't quite sure how to mingle with the void. Common arrangements include triadic groupings, the Sanzon Seki 3 Buddha stones being a classic, symbolizing a central Buddha figure with two attendants. But there are countless variations, reflecting mountains, waterfalls even without actual water, implied by the stone's shape and placement, shorelines, or purely abstract compositions designed to evoke a particular feeling or aid a specific meditation. The balance is always asymmetrical fukinsei. Remember, dynamic and alive. The spaces between the stones, the emma or active void, are just as important as the stones themselves, creating tension, harmony, and a sense of depth. It's a bit like agonizing over the perfect placement of furniture in a room, but with infinitely more spiritual gravitas and fewer arguments about whether the sofa blocks the TV. The reverence for stones could reach extraordinary levels. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. There are numerous tales and legends attached to certain famous stones in historic Japanese gardens, with some believed to be imbued with special powers, protective spirits, or even curses if moved or disrespected. More historically verifiable are accounts of powerful samurai lords and daimyo going to incredible lengths, sometimes even instigating territorial disputes or engaging in elaborate, costly expeditions, all to acquire a single, particularly coveted stone for their garden. These weren't just decorative objects, they were symbols of power, aesthetic discernment, and profound connection to nature's enduring spirit. Naturally, the way these ancient cultures viewed such powerful natural elements invites ongoing interpretation. Scholars sometimes engage in discussions regarding the extent to which ancient Zen garden designers and their patrons viewed these carefully selected stones primarily through an animistic lens, that is, as actual embodiments of local spirits kami or concentrated natural forces, versus their later, perhaps more abstract, interpretation as purely symbolic elements within a sophisticated meditative composition. Was that striking? Moss-covered boulder seen as the literal abode of a nature spirit, or as a more metaphorical representation of, say, steadfastness or enlightened consciousness? The lines were likely blurred, with older indigenous Shinto beliefs in the sacredness of nature intertwining seamlessly with imported Buddhist philosophies. So, as you, the samurai, gaze upon these arrangements of stone, you are not just seeing rocks, you are seeing mountains of the mind, islands of tranquility in the sea of worldly troubles. You feel their immense weight, their coolness to the touch on a hot day, their rough or smooth textures. You sense their age, their silent witness to generations of human striving. In their unyielding presence, you find an anchor for your own often turbulent spirit. They teach you about resilience, about the beauty of imperfection. A crack or a patch of lichen isn't a flaw, but a mark of character, and about the quiet strength found in stillness. These ishigumi are not just features in the garden, they are the garden, in its most fundamental, enduring sense, offering a solid foundation for that mountain strength and mind's calm you so diligently seek. That solid foundation of mountain strength and mind's calm, which you diligently cultivate through your quiet contemplation of the garden's enduring stones, often finds its perfect counterpoint, its fluid and ever-adapting companion, in the element of water. Whether it's visibly present, shimmering invitingly in a sun-dappled pond, gurgling with a soft, persistent voice down a carefully constructed channel of smaller rocks, or merely suggested with profound artistry by the masterful sweep of white sand, water brings a dynamic, reflective, and deeply cleansing wisdom to the Zen garden. For you, the samurai, seeking to navigate the currents of a demanding life, it teaches invaluable lessons of flow, purity, and the ever-changing yet ever-present nature of reality itself. When actual water graces the garden, it takes many forms, each with its own subtle voice and symbolic weight. You might encounter a still, reflective pond, an ike, its surface a mirror to the sky, the passing clouds, the overhanging branches of a maple, or perhaps, in a quiet moment, your own thoughtful face gazing back. This mirroring quality is no accident. It's an invitation to self-reflection, to see the world and yourself with clarity. Then there are the streams, the nagare, chattering as they make their way around stones and through mossy banks, symbols of the constant flow of time, of life's journey with all its twists and turns. A waterfall, or taki, even a small one, can be a focal point, its energetic cascade representing the power of nature, the downward flow of spiritual insight, or the breaking down of obstacles. The sound alone, a gentle murmur or more vigorous splash, becomes part of the garden's living soundtrack, a natural white noise machine that helps to soothe the mind and wash away the day's accumulated stress. One of the most significant and intimately experienced water features, especially if your garden path, your roji, leads towards a tea house, is the Tsukubai Dunju. This is a low stone water basin, and its presence is a key mainstream historical fact of tea garden design. Before entering the intensely focused and spiritual space of the tea ceremony, you, along with other guests, would pause here. You'd take a bamboo ladle, a hishaku, dip it into the basin's cool, light, fresh water, and perform a ritual purification, rinsing your hands, then your mouth. This wasn't just about physical cleanliness. It was a profound symbolic act of washing away the dust of the mundane world, leaving behind your worries, your ego, your worldly concerns, so you could enter the tea room with a cleansed spirit, ready for pure presence. It's a beautiful, humble ritual, a moment of pause and intention. It's a bit like trying to achieve inner reflection by staring into a city puddle. The intent might be there, but the effect is slightly less profound when it's just reflecting a discarded fast food wrapper and your own muddy boot. The Sukubai offers a cleaner slate, both literally and metaphorically. But what if your garden has no actual water? What if you are in a karesansui, a dry landscape garden, where vast expanses of raked sand or fine gravel stretch out before you, perhaps punctuated by those island-like rock formations we spoke of? Here, like water's wisdom is conveyed through powerful symbolism. The meticulously raked patterns, the saman, are not just pretty designs, and they are water. The swirling eddies around a rock, the long are parallel lines suggesting a calm sea stretching to an unseen horizon, the gentle ripples lapping at a stony shore. These are created with an almost devotional attention to the true nature of water's movement. It's a conceptual art piece that your slightly bewildered aunt might peer at and ask, "But where's the actual water?" Dear, the answer, of course, is that it's right there in the mind of the viewer, awakened by the garden's artistry. And for a quirky, fascinating insight into this practice, it's said that some ancient garden designers, particularly those specializing in karsansui, would spend weeks, even months, in intense observation of how natural water actually flowed, eddied, and created patterns around real rocks and rivers or along coastlines, before they would even attempt to replicate those precise energetic signatures in raked sand. They weren't just guessing, they were trying to capture the very essence, the dynamic spirit of water, the maintenance of these dry seas. By the way, is anything but low maintenance, despite the lack of actual H2O, keeping those lines perfect, free of fallen leaves or the errant footprint of a stray cat, a true Zen challenge. That one requires constant, mindful attention. It's a daily practice of smoothing and restoring, much like the daily practice of smoothing and restoring calm to your own mind. And this brings us to a crucial scholarly discussion. Historians and Zen scholars continue to explore the primary drivers behind the significant development and enduring popularity of karsansi gardens in Japan. Was this profound shift towards abstraction predominantly due to practical constraints such as a lack of readily available water sources in certain temple locations or perhaps difficult terrain? Or was it driven by a desire for lower maintenance, a theory now largely seen as an oversimplification? Given the intense labor involved in their upkeep, or more compellingly, did it represent a deep philosophical evolution within Zen practice itself? A move towards greater internalization of nature and a more direct, unmediated engagement with concepts like emptiness and form. It's likely a complex interplay of all these factors, but the result is undeniably powerful. Whether real or symbolic, water in the Zen garden is a master teacher. It teaches the wisdom of yielding, of adapting its shape to any container, yet also possessing the power to wear away stone over time. A subtle lesson in gentle persistence for you. The samurai, who often had to balance yielding to your lord's will with maintaining your own inner strength. Still water offers the gift of clarity, reflecting the world as it is, without distortion, inviting you to see your own thoughts and emotions with similar non-judgmental awareness. Flowing water speaks of impermanence, reminding you that all things are in constant flux, that clinging to any fixed state leads to suffering. Even the sound of water, or its imagined sound in the silent garden, has a purifying effect. The rhythmic drip of a shishiodoshi, the bamboo deer scarer, as its arm fills with water and then tips to make a distinct clack against a stone, became an iconic sound of Japanese gardens. Originally practical, it evolved into an auditory punctuation mark in the garden's stillness, a reminder to return to the present moment. So, as you contemplate the water, real or represented, you're absorbing its lessons. You learn to flow with life's challenges, to find clarity in stillness, to appreciate the beauty of the transient, and to understand that even in emptiness, there is profound meaning and boundless potential. The wisdom of water seeps into your consciousness as refreshing and essential as a cool drink on a parched day. That wisdom of water, seeping into your consciousness as refreshing and essential as a cool drink on a parched day, nurtures not only your spirit but also the very green life that breathes its quiet existence throughout the Zen garden. For in these carefully curated spaces, plants are far more than mere decoration, more than just horticultural window dressing. They are living, breathing teachers. Each species, each carefully pruned branch, each individual leaf, each fleeting blossom of verse in the garden's ongoing, deeply resonant poem about impermanence, resilience, and the subtle, often overlooked beauty of the natural world. And for you, the samurai, whose own life is a testament to both disciplined strength and profound vulnerability, these green companions offer endless lessons. The selection of plants in a Zen garden is rarely about creating a riot of color or a showy display of exotic blooms. That would be like shouting in a library. It misses the point entirely. Instead, the emphasis is on subtlety, on shades of green, on texture, on form, and above all, on how each plant contributes to an atmosphere of wabi-sabi, that beauty of imperfection and transience, and yugun, that profound, suggestive grace. You won't find neatly regimented flower beds demanding attention. Instead, you'll find carefully chosen species that speak in quieter tones. Imagine the deep, resinous scent of pine on a warm afternoon, the cool, yielding touch of a carpet of moss under your fingertips, the rustle of bamboo leaves in a gentle breeze, sounding like soft rain, or the astonishing, fiery blaze of maple leaves in autumn. A final, glorious shout before the quietude of winter. Moss tie, coke is practically a sacred element in many Zen gardens, thriving in the shade and moisture, patiently blanketing stones and earth with its velvety green. It speaks of age, of tranquility, of humility. It doesn't strive, it simply is quietly beautifying the ground it covers. Ferns, with their intricate fronds, unfurl in damp corners, adding layers of texture. And then there are the trees, the stoic anchors of the green world. The pine song. Matsu is a dominant figure, often meticulously trained over decades, even centuries. Its gnarled branches and rugged bark symbolizing longevity, endurance, and unshakable character. A samurai might spend more patient hours coaxing a dwarf pine into the perfect, windswept form in a bonsai pot than he would drilling a particularly clumsy new recruit, recognizing that true strength often requires gentle, persistent guidance rather than brute force. Bamboo Jew. Teak is another garden stalwart. Admired for its resilience, it bends in the strongest winds but rarely breaks, and its elegant, upright strength. Its hollow stems are sometimes seen as a metaphor for emptiness in the Zen sense, a mind free of clutter and open to insight. And then there's the plum tree May, Uma. Cherished for its courage, it's often the first to bloom. Sometimes while snow still blankets the ground, its delicate blossoms a vibrant promise of spring in the harshest of conditions, a potent symbol of hope and perseverance against adversity. This trio, pine, bamboo, and plum, are often grouped together. A famous combination known as the Three Friends of Winter, Suihan Sanyu, Saikan no Sanyu. This is a significant mainstream historical fact. This grouping is a traditional symbolic motif in East Asian art and horticulture, admired because these plants all thrive or show their unique beauty even during the cold, harsh conditions of winter, collectively representing perseverance, integrity, and optimism in the face of hardship. For a samurai, these were qualities to cultivate in oneself. Of course, the most poignant lesson taught by the plant life in a Zen garden is that of impermanence. The Buddhist concept of mujo wu chang, and the gentle melancholy or wistful appreciation of this transience, known as mono no aware wu no aire, the vibrant flush of azalea blooms juju. Tsutsuji in late spring is breathtaking, but brief. The cherry blossoms ying. Sakura, though perhaps more iconic in broader Japanese culture than strictly in austere Zen gardens, are the ultimate teachers of this lesson. Their stunning, cloud-like beauty lasts but a few days before the petals scatter like snow. It's a bit like a viral internet trend, incredibly beautiful. Everyone's talking about it. And then, poof, it's gone, leaving just the memory and the anticipation of its return. The changing colors of the maple leaves Hongjia, Mamaji or Kaide in autumn, are another spectacular display of nature's artistry, a final, vibrant flare before the quiet dormancy of winter. This constant cycle of budding, growing, blooming, fading, and renewing is a mirror to your own life, a reminder that all things are in flux, even the act of pruning. Sente is a meditative art. With sharp shears, you remove what is dead, what is overgrown, what obscures the essential form and health of the plant. It's not about forcing the plant into an unnatural shape, but about respectfully guiding it, helping it to express its best self. A discipline not unlike the samurai's own continuous refinement of character, and yes, sometimes even a weed might appear. While meticulous care is paramount, one might humorously reflect, when the head monk isn't looking. Ah yes, that rogue dandelion. A profound lesson in the unexpected manifestations of nature's untamed will. Or perhaps just a sign that Kenjiro-san missed a spot during his weeding meditation. The palette of the Zen garden is predominantly green, but the shades and textures are infinite. The focus on evergreen plants ensures a sense of life even in winter, while deciduous trees mark the distinct seasons. Flowers, when used, are often subtle, like the quiet elegance of a camellia chun, tsubaki, whose whole flower head sometimes drops suddenly, a characteristic some have linked to the samurai's acceptance of fate. Though this is a debated and somewhat somber interpretation, here's a rather charming, quirky tidbit for your contemplation. Some deeply dedicated Zen practitioners and garden aesthetes were known to cultivate an astonishing variety of mosses, sometimes hundreds of distinct types, appreciating the most minute differences in their textures, growth patterns, and subtle shades of green. They might even create entire miniature landscapes or moss maps in secluded, shaded corners of the garden, like tiny, secret worlds revealing the universe in miniature. The understanding of these plant symbols is naturally layered. Scholarly discussion continues regarding the degree to which the complex symbolic meanings attributed to specific plants in Japanese gardens were universally codified and consistently understood by all viewers, including every samurai who might have strolled through such a space, versus the possibility of more personal, intuitive, or idiosyncratic interpretations playing a significant role in their individual contemplative experience. Did every warrior see resilience in bamboo? Or did some just appreciate its graceful lines and the sound it made in the wind? Perhaps the power lies in the blend of shared cultural understanding and deeply personal connection. Ultimately, the green life of the Zen garden is integral to its silent sermon. The plants anchor you in the present moment, even as they speak of the passage of time. They teach you about resilience in the face of storms, the courage to bloom even in harsh conditions, the grace of letting go when a season ends, and the constant promise of renewal. You, the samurai, watching a single leaf twirl to the ground, might see in it not just an ending, but a beautiful, necessary part of an unending cycle, a reflection of your own journey through life's changing seasons. That single leaf, twirling gracefully to the ground, marking another turn in life's changing seasons, might eventually find its way onto a surface meticulously prepared to receive it, or rather to have it gently swept away from its pristine expanse. We move now, in our journey, from the vibrant, living green of moss and maple to the stark, yet profoundly eloquent canvases of the Karesensui, the Japanese dry landscape garden. Here, the meditative art of raking samanshawen, or sand and gravel patterns, creates rhythmic waves not of literal water, but of deep, focused contemplation. For you, the samurai, accustomed to the disciplined forms of swordsmanship, this seemingly simple practice of drawing lines in stone offers yet another potent path to that elusive inner stillness, a way to comb out the tangles of a restless mind. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast, shallow sea of carefully selected and graded white or gray gravel, perhaps representing the immeasurable ocean or a tranquil lake. In your hands is a specialized wooden rake, its teeth spaced just so. This isn't about quickly tidying up. It's a slow, deliberate, and intensely mindful process. The task before you is to create or recreate the salmon. These patterns are not haphazard. The most fundamental might be straight lines, drawn with unwavering precision, stretching across the expanse, evoking a sense of immense calm, of boundless, still water, or even the pure emptiness shunyata from which all forms arise. These lines demand absolute focus, a moment's lapse in concentration, a wavering hand, and the illusion of perfect stillness is broken. Trying to achieve this perfectly straight flow after, say, a particularly enthusiastic sake tasting session the night before today's lines would be proudly sponsored by Wobbly Path Zen, a testament to human imperfection, if not exactly the desired effect. More common, perhaps, are the patterns that emulate flowing water. Gentle, undulating waves, Sazanami Gata or a more dynamic Ryuman Gata, might ripple across the surface, suggesting currents or the gentle movement of a breeze over water. Around the island rocks, you would meticulously rake concentric circles or spirals, perfectly capturing the way ripples spread outwards when a pebble, or in this case, a symbolic mountain meets the water. Each line must connect seamlessly. Each curve must flow naturally into the next. It's like calligraphy, but on a grand horizontal scale. The rake your brush, the gravel your textured paper. The mainstream historical fact here is that the demanding task of raking the salmon patterns in Zen temple gardens was, and often still is, primarily undertaken by Zen monks as part of their daily meditative practice and temple upkeep. Known as samu, these intricate patterns are not permanent fixtures. They are typically re-raked every few days or perhaps once a week, and certainly after disturbances like heavy rain, fallen leaves, or the inconsiderate wanderings of a temple cat. The act of raking itself is a full-body meditation. You don't just use your arms, your stance, your breathing. Your entire being is involved. It requires a delicate balance of strength and control, enough pressure to create a clear impression, but not so much as to displace the gravel clumsily. The rhythmic, repetitive motion can be deeply calming, lulling the conscious mind into a state of focused awareness, where thoughts drift by like clouds, unheeded. This is Zanshin Kan Sin in action, a state of sustained attention, of lingering mental presence, crucial in martial arts and equally vital here. You are completely absorbed in the present moment, in the feel of the rake, the sight of the emerging pattern, the soft, scratching sound of the teeth on the gravel, a sound that, in the profound silence of the early morning, can become a universe in itself. The state of mind of the raker is paramount. Ideally, it's one of calm, emptiness, and pure intention, free from the disturbances of ego or worldly anxieties. And here's a fascinating, if slightly intimidating, quirky tidbit for you. Legend has it that some discerning Zen masters could accurately discern the state of a monk's mind simply by observing the quality and precision of the lines he raked in the gravel. A wavering, hesitant, or uneven line might indicate a troubled, distracted, or agitated mind, while a clear, strong, and flowing line suggested deep focus, inner peace, and serenity. An imperfectly raked section of the garden could thus lead to some very pointed, though undoubtedly delivered with utmost calm. Feedback from one's teacher. Imagine the subtle peer pressure among the monastic community. Brother Kenji seems to have left a rogue pebble slightly askew again in the sea of tranquility. The shame, the profound, unspoken shame. These patterns, so meticulously created, are also inherently impermanent, a constant reminder of the transient nature of all things, like a beautifully crafted sandcastle on the beach, destined to be reclaimed by the tide. The salmon will eventually be erased and redrawn. Yet the value lies not in the permanence of the product, but in the mindful process of its creation. Each time the gravel is raked, the garden is, in a sense, reborn. It's a daily renewal, a fresh start, a physical manifestation of the mind's ability to return to clarity and order. While the symbolism of flowing water or calm seas is widely understood, the deeper meanings can be more elusive. Art historians and Zen scholars continue to analyze and debate the deeper symbolic intentions behind certain complex or ancient salmon patterns found in revered gardens. Are they primarily abstract aesthetic expressions of natural water phenomena? Beautiful designs meant to soothe the eye and calm the spirit? Or do some of these intricate weavings of line and space perhaps encode more specific, esoteric cosmological maps, sacred mandalas, or even prescribed pathways for mental journeys to be undertaken by the viewer during meditation? The truth may be as multifaceted as the gardens themselves, allowing for layers of interpretation. For you, the samurai, engaging in this practice, or even just contemplating its results, the raked patterns of the Karsansui offer a unique mirror. The discipline required to create them echoes the discipline of your martial training. The focus demanded mirrors the focus needed in battle or in strategic counsel. The resulting beauty, born from simple materials and mindful effort, is a testament to the power of order and intention. As you gaze upon these waves of stone, you are invited to find a corresponding stillness and flow within your own heart. To see the vastness of the universe reflected in a carefully tended patch of ground, and to understand that even in the most disciplined forms, there can be an ocean of peace. That ocean of peace, discovered within the disciplined lines of a raked gravel sea or the still reflection of a pond, wasn't just an abstract philosophical concept for you. The samurai. It was a vital, life-sustaining resource, a wellspring you could return to again and again. In a world that often felt like it was teetering on the very brink of chaos, where the shrill clash of steel, the roar of war cries, and the pervasive scent of smoke were never entirely distant memories or future threats. Your Zen garden, or perhaps the borrowed tranquility of a nearby temple's carefully tended grounds, became so much more than just a pretty view or a status symbol. It was a true haven, a psychological fortress, a desperately needed escape hatch from the relentless, often crushing and deeply personal stress of feudal existence. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer weight you carry, the constant demand for unwavering loyalty, the ever-present possibility of sudden death, your own, or that of your comrades, or indeed, those you were ordered to dispatch. Add to this the complex political intrigues, the shifting alliances, the burden of honor that dictated so much of your conduct, and the profound responsibility for those under your command or your family depending on you. Sleep might be fleeting, snatched between patrols or before a dawn offensive. Your to-do list, as we've joked, was less about errands and more about survival and duty. It's not exactly the kind of environment conducive to a relaxed state of mind. You couldn't just book a spa day with fluffy robes and cucumber water to de-stress. Though the idea might have been appealing after a particularly grueling siege, the feudal equivalent was, perhaps, far more profound: the garden retreat. It's a mainstream historical fact that many samurai, particularly those of higher rank and means, did indeed have private gardens, ranging from modest introspective courtyards, tsuboniwa, to more expansive and elaborate stroll gardens, attached to their residences or yashiki. These weren't solely for ostentatious display. They served as intensely personal spaces for relaxation, quiet contemplation, solitary practice of the refined arts like calligraphy or poetry, and, critically, for mental and spiritual regrouping. These gardens were designed to be worlds unto themselves, enclosed, often by high walls or dense planting, creating a distinct separation from the clamor and chaos outside. Step with me now as you, the weary warrior, push open a simple wooden gate. The sounds of the bustling castle town or the tense atmosphere of the military encampment begin to fade, replaced by the whisper of wind in the bamboo, the gentle drip of water into a stone basin, the distant song of a bird. The air itself feels different here. cooler, perhaps scented with damp earth, moss, and the subtle fragrance of pine or a flowering plum, rather than the acrid smell of wood smoke or the metallic tang of the armory. This sensory shift is the first balm to your frayed nerves. Here, you can metaphorically, and perhaps literally, take off the armor, shed the rigid persona of the warrior, and allow yourself to simply be. Your garden might have been your version of an away message to the world. Do not disturb, currently engaged in vital negotiations with the void, possibly hiding from my overzealous quartermaster and his endless inventories. This was a liminal space, a threshold between the public world of duty and danger and the private world of your inner self. Here, you could confront the anxieties and traumas of your profession, not in the heat and terror of battle, but in a calm, controlled environment. The ordered beauty of the garden, the carefully placed stones, the meticulously pruned trees, the serene expanse of raked sand provided a soothing counterpoint to the disarray and brutality you so often witnessed. It was a tangible reminder that peace, harmony, and beauty could exist, even if only in this cultivated sanctuary. This wasn't about denying the harsh realities of your world, but about finding a space where you could process them, where you could reconnect with a deeper sense of meaning or perspective. And sometimes these retreats held very personal, almost secret elements. For a quirky insight into this private world, it's said that some samurai, within the secluded confines of their personal garden havens, might have incorporated small, almost hidden shrines dedicated to a personal protective deity, or designated specific, unassuming natural elements. Perhaps a uniquely gnarled tree root that resembled a dragon, or a curiously marked pebble found on a significant campaign, as focal points for intensely private, almost idiosyncratic rituals. These rituals might be aimed at calming their nerves before a crucial battle, seeking guidance for a difficult decision, or simply offering a moment of personal communion with forces they felt watched over them. A unique blend of orthodox Zen practice, older Shinto reverence for nature spirits, and deeply personal superstition. It was their own unique blend, their own spiritual safe space. The principles you absorbed in the garden, the mindfulness from focusing on a single stone, the acceptance of impermanence from watching a blossom fall, the clarity from observing the still surface of a pond, weren't meant to stay confined within its walls. The aim was to carry that centeredness, that resilience, that calm awareness, back out into the demanding arena of your daily life. The focus honed by raking sand could translate into the unwavering concentration needed in a duel. The acceptance of constant change could help you face the uncertainties of war with greater equanimity. The inner peace cultivated in the garden's silence could become a steadfast anchor when storms of chaos raged around you. Of course, the extent to which these garden retreats truly transformed individuals is a matter of ongoing reflection. Historians and psychologists of culture continue to discuss the actual long-term efficacy of these carefully constructed garden retreats for the samurai class. Were they genuinely transformative spaces that fostered lasting psychological resilience, deep ethical reflection, and a more compassionate worldview? Or were they, perhaps more often, sophisticated and necessary temporary coping mechanisms, artful respites that allowed warriors to endure an overwhelmingly brutal and often dehumanizing society without completely fracturing? The answer likely lies somewhere in the complex spectrum between these poles, varying immensely from one individual to another. But what seems undeniable is the vital role these havens played. They were more than just aesthetically pleasing landscapes. They were essential tools for psychological survival. Spaces where the samurai could momentarily lay down the sword and pick up a different kind of strength. The strength found in stillness, in nature, in introspection, in the quiet solitude of the garden, amidst the silent sermon of stone and moss. You could perhaps hear the faint, essential whisper of your own true self beneath the hardened exterior of the warrior. And that, in a life as fraught as yours, was an escape, a solace, and a strength beyond measure. That solace and strength, That profound ocean of peace you found within the garden's carefully composed embrace was indeed a precious commodity in the turbulent landscape of feudal Japan. And while many individual samurai, like yourself, might have cultivated their own modest havens, their private corners of carefully raked sand or thoughtfully placed stones, the creation of the truly magnificent, iconic Zen gardens, the ones that still take our breath away centuries later, often required a patron of considerable power, influence, and, let's be frank, very deep pockets. We turn our gaze now to the warlords, the great daimyo, and even the shoguns themselves, whose involvement added another fascinating and sometimes complex layer to the story of these tranquil spaces. Under their patronage, gardens could transform into stunning statements of authority, elegant stages for intricate social and political dramas, and even arenas for a subtle, aesthetically veiled form of one-upmanship, all while still, at least in theory, offering a path to that deeper Zen understanding you so diligently seek. The motivations for a powerful feudal lord to pour vast resources into constructing a Zen garden were as varied and multifaceted as the lords themselves. For some, it was undoubtedly a genuine expression of personal piety, a sincere engagement with Zen Buddhist philosophy, and a desire for a personal sanctuary where they, too, could escape the immense pressures of their position. Imagine being responsible for the governance of an entire province, the welfare of thousands, and the constant threat of war or betrayal from ambitious rivals. A private garden, imbued with Zen principles, could offer a vital space for reflection, decision-making, or simply a moment to breathe. You might picture a powerful daimyo, after a long day of strategic councils and reviewing troop deployments, quietly sipping tea by his pond, the moonlight reflecting on the water, finding a moment of clarity amidst the complexities of his world. His garden budget, you can imagine, was probably slightly more than your average weekend warrior's, allowing for a scale and perfection most could only dream of. However, these gardens were rarely just for personal solace. In the highly stratified and status-conscious society of feudal Japan, a magnificent garden was also a potent symbol of a daimyo's power, wealth, and, crucially, his cultural sophistication. It demonstrated that he was not merely a brute warrior, but a man of taste, refinement, and learning, qualities increasingly valued, especially during more peaceful interludes. Patronizing influential Zen temples and renowned monk designers also served a political purpose, aligning the daimyo with respected spiritual institutions, which often wielded considerable indirect influence. Monks were often scholars, advisors, and even diplomats. Their favor could be a valuable asset. It was a bit like a modern billionaire funding a prestigious university arts program. Good for the soul, perhaps, but also very good for the public image. These grand gardens also became important social and political stages. Imagine crucial negotiations with a rival lord taking place not in a stuffy, formal audience chamber, but during a leisurely stroll through an exquisitely designed landscape. The serene beauty of the surroundings could subtly influence the mood, perhaps smoothing over potential conflicts, or, conversely, the subtle symbolism within the garden, a particularly dominant rock formation here. A vista that emphasized the vastness of the host's domain there could serve as a very polite, very Japanese form of intimidation. Notice the way these ancient stones suggest my clan's deep-rooted and unshakable power. Lord Sato More Tea. It was diplomacy by design. Poetry gatherings, tea ceremonies, seasonal flower viewings, all these essential social rituals of the elite often unfolded within these carefully crafted environments, each event reinforcing the host's cultural standing. There was undoubtedly a degree of competition involved, too. A subtle rivalry between daimyo to possess the most beautiful, most talked-about garden, a bit like keeping up with the Joneses. If the Joneses commanded armies of samurai and lived in fortified castles, Lord Tanaka's new pond is certainly large. One might observe, while mentally noting that one's own moss collection was far superior, This high-level patronage had a significant impact on the evolution of garden design. With greater resources came the ability to undertake projects of a much grander scale. While a common samurai might have a small courtyard viewing garden, a daimyo could commission sprawling stroll gardens, kayu shikitein, designed to be experienced by walking along a winding path that revealed a series of carefully composed scenes. A miniature mountain landscape here, a beach of white gravel there, a rustic tea house nestled by a stream further on. These were immersive environments, designed for movement and the progressive unfolding of beauty. They could also command the best materials, enormous, characterful stones transported from distant provinces, rare and ancient trees, vast quantities of carefully selected gravel, and, of course, they could employ the most renowned garden designers of the age. One of the most celebrated examples of such patronage is that of Ashikaga Yoshimasa, the 8th Ashikaga shogun during the Muromachi period. His retirement villa, now famously known as Ginkaku-ji or the Silver Pavilion, though it was never actually covered in silver, features a remarkable Zen garden, including the iconic Sea of Silver Sand, with its massive, truncated sand cone representing Mount Fuji. This garden is a quintessential expression of Higashiyama Bunka, the East Mountain culture, which deeply valued subtlety, simplicity, and the aesthetics of wabi-sabi. Later, during the early Edo period, figures like Kobori Enshu, himself a daimyo and a renowned tea master, became highly influential garden designers, creating elegant, sophisticated gardens for the imperial court and other powerful patrons, blending Zen ideals with a more refined, almost painterly aesthetic. The level of a daimyo's personal involvement could vary. Some were deeply hands-on, with very specific visions. For a quirky taste of this aristocratic obsession, it's said that some particularly enthusiastic or perhaps just finicky daimyo would issue astonishingly precise directives for their gardens, ordering, for example, the rerouting of a distant natural stream over several miles just to achieve the perfect water flow for their pond, or insisting that only moss collected from a specific revered mountain, rumored to have unique spiritual properties, be used for their grounds. One can only imagine the eye-rolling, and then the dutiful scurrying of the retainers tasked with these highly specific and probably quite arduous aesthetic quests. Naturally, the dynamic between a powerful, often strong-willed patron and an expert Zen monk or garden designer, who also had strong aesthetic and philosophical convictions, could be complex. Debate continues among historians concerning the primary driving force behind a powerful daimyo's most ambitious garden projects. Was the final creation a true reflection of the Lord's deep personal aesthetic vision and spiritual inclinations? A genuine collaboration? Or was it more often a calculated display, heavily shaped by the prevailing tastes of influential Zen advisors and the overarching need to project a certain culturally sophisticated and authoritative image to their peers, rivals, and indeed, to posterity? As with many artistic endeavors involving powerful patrons, the answer is likely a nuanced blend of all these factors. What remains, however, is the incredible legacy these warlords left behind. Amidst their political maneuvering, their military campaigns, and their struggles for dominance, they also found the means, and often the vision, to cultivate spaces of profound beauty and tranquility. These daimyo gardens, born from a mixture of power, piety, and perhaps a dash of pride, stand as enduring testaments to the human desire to create harmony, even in the most discordant of times, offering you, the weary time traveler, a glimpse into a world where the brushstroke of a garden designer could be as mighty, in its own way, as the stroke of a sword. That mighty brushstroke of the garden designer, capable of shaping landscapes as powerfully, in its own serene way, as any sword ever reshaped battle lines or redrew provincial borders, was most often wielded by a hand guided not by feudal ambition or the desire for worldly glory, but by profound spiritual discipline and a deep understanding of the human heart. While daimyo and shoguns often provided the patronage, the earth, and the considerable resources, It was frequently the Zen Buddhist monks themselves who breathed life into these spaces, who brought forth the very soul of the garden. These were, in many ways, the true masters of serenity, the original architects and meticulous caretakers of these tranquil realms, translating the deepest, most subtle principles of their Zen philosophy into living, breathing art forms that continue to guide you. The weary seeker of calm, even now across the centuries. Imagine the life of such a monk within a Zen temple. Their existence was one of rigorous discipline, meditation, study, and, very importantly, samu, daily work practice, which was not seen as a chore but as an integral part of their spiritual training, a form of active meditation. And for many, this samu involved the creation and meticulous upkeep of the temple gardens. They weren't just spiritual guides, they were often highly skilled artists, poets, calligraphers, and remarkably practical horticulturalists, landscape architects, and even rudimentary engineers. Their understanding of Zen, concepts like impermanence mujo, emptiness ku, simplicity kanso, naturalness shizin, and the profound beauty of the imperfect and aged wabi-sabi wasn't just theoretical. It was something they lived, breathed, and quite literally, dug into the earth. When a Zen monk designed a garden, they weren't merely arranging rocks and plants for aesthetic appeal. They were creating a physical manifestation of Buddhist teachings, a three-dimensional textbook on the nature of reality. The garden became a dojo, a place of spiritual practice and realization, not just for themselves, but for all who entered. Each element was chosen and placed with profound intention. A gnarled, ancient pine might be positioned not just for its beauty, but to evoke the steadfastness of enlightened mind. An expanse of raked white gravel wasn't just a representation of water, but a canvas for contemplating the vastness of the void, the source of all potential. You might picture a senior monk, his robes perhaps a little dusty from his work, instructing a novice not through lectures but by pointing to a single perfectly placed stone, or the way moss patiently embraced its surface, inviting the younger monk to see the universe in that small detail. The head monk might look at a novice's first attempt at raking sand and, instead of a direct critique, offer an enigmatic Zen koan. Your lines, young one, possess the sound of one hand clapping. Rather tentatively and with a slight wobble to the left, deeply profound and utterly unhelpful in a practical sense, which was often the point. The mainstream historical fact that truly underscores this is the towering figure of Muso Soseki, 1275, 1351. We've touched upon him before, but his significance as a monk designer cannot be overstated. He was a highly respected Zen master, a pivotal spiritual leader of his time, but also celebrated as one of Japan's most gifted and prolific early garden designers. He is credited with designing or significantly influencing numerous crucial temple gardens, including the sublime Saiho-ji, famously known as the Moss Temple for its ethereal, dreamlike carpets of countless moss varieties, and the majestic Tenryuji, with its dramatic use of borrowed scenery. Muso Soseki's work perfectly epitomized the seamless integration of profound Zen principles with the art of landscape, creating environments that were not just beautiful but were conducive to meditation and spiritual awakening. He wasn't just arranging scenery, he was crafting pathways to enlightenment. The dedication of these monks to their gardens was legendary. It wasn't about personal fame or creating the next viral gardening trend for the Heian-era Instagram equivalent. Their devotion was to the practice itself, to the expression of Zen, to creating spaces that could genuinely help others quiet their minds. This intense focus and deep connection to their work often led to highly nuanced understandings of nature and design, and sometimes their teaching methods could be rather unconventional. For a quirky, yet illustrative tidbit, there are numerous anecdotal accounts from Zen lore of esteemed masters deliberately assigning seemingly pointless or incredibly frustrating gardening tasks to their eager young disciples. Imagine being told to move a massive, heavy rock a few feet to the left, only to be instructed the next day to move it back to its original position, and then repeat the process for a week. Or picture a novice painstakingly weeding a gravel path until it's immaculate, only to have the master calmly scatter a fresh handful of seeds upon it. This wasn't sadistic hazing, it was a direct, experiential teaching method designed to cultivate immense patience, to break down the ego's attachment to results and recognition, and to foster a profound understanding of non-attachment and the acceptance of what is. The garden was the classroom, and the lessons were often hard-earned. The atmosphere within these temple gardens, especially when the monks were engaged in their samu, must have been one of focused, quiet industry. The rhythmic scratch of a bamboo rake on gravel, the snip of shears, the murmur of chanted sutras perhaps drifting from a nearby hall, all blending into a symphony of serene activity. Don't mistake the humble robes and shaved heads for a lack of worldly skill or inner toughness, though these were individuals who had often turned away from worldly lives, including some who might have been samurai themselves, bringing a unique blend of discipline and spiritual insight to their tasks. The monk who could create a garden of sublime peace could probably also, if the extremely unlikely need arose, calmly demonstrate a few disarming moves learned from a former life or from the martial arts traditions also practiced in some temples. Naturally, the precise way this sophisticated garden design knowledge was passed down through generations of monks is a subject of interest. Scholarly inquiry continues into the exact methods of transmission for complex Zen garden design knowledge and techniques among monks in medieval Japan. Was it primarily through formal instruction, with codified principles laid down in texts that perhaps are now lost to time, or was it more commonly, as many suspect, through an intuitive, deeply personal master-apprentice model, based on years of direct experience, keen observation of the master at work, and an embodied understanding that transcended written words? The subtle art of feeling the right placement for a stone, or the correct flow of a raked pattern is, after all, not notoriously difficult to capture in a manual. Ultimately, these Zen monks were the quiet conduits, the patient hands and contemplative minds that shaped not just earth and stone, but also the spiritual landscape of an era. Their legacy is not one of imposing monuments to individual ego, but of shared spaces designed to foster peace, insight, and a deeper connection to the rhythms of nature and the truths of existence. They were the true masters of serenity, and their gardens remain potent invitations to find that same serenity within ourselves. A quiet testament to the enduring power of a mindful life. That enduring power of a mindful life, so patiently cultivated by the Zen monks within their serene garden sanctuaries, and so earnestly sought by you. The contemplative samurai faced its most brutal and often heartbreaking test when the ferocious tides of war and societal chaos crashed against the temple gates or swept like a wildfire through the meticulously kept estates of their patrons. For as much as these gardens were conceived and lovingly designed as havens of profound peace, they existed within a physical world frequently, and often horrifically, torn apart by conflict. Maintaining such delicate creations, such carefully balanced expressions of tranquility and spiritual insight, amidst the wholesale destruction and brutal expediency of feudal warfare, was an act of profound, almost defiant, dedication, a testament to the resilience of both the human spirit and the gardens themselves. Imagine the scene. You've spent years, perhaps, tending to your small patch of meticulously raked gravel, or carefully nurturing the moss on a particular group of stones, finding in this practice a measure of calm, a connection to something timeless. Then the war drums sound, not as a distant rumor, but as an immediate, terrifying reality. Rival armies clash nearby, or perhaps your own city or castle town comes under siege. What becomes of your carefully crafted serenity then? The Onin War, a devastating civil conflict that raged from 1467 to 1477, is a stark mainstream historical fact that underscores this peril. It utterly ravaged Kyoto, which was then the capital of Japan, leading to the wholesale destruction of countless ancient temples, magnificent aristocratic mansions, and, tragically, their invaluable and often irreplaceable gardens. Entire sections of the city were reduced to smoking rubble. It's hard to imagine a more hostile environment for the delicate art of Zen gardening. The threats were manifold and often simultaneous. Fire, the constant companion of medieval warfare, was perhaps the most indiscriminate destroyer. Wooden temple structures, pagodas, and tea houses within gardens would go up in flames with terrifying speed, scorching ancient trees and cracking treasured stones with their intense heat. Battles themselves could spill directly into these sacred or refined spaces. Imagine armored samurai, their swords flashing, clashing amidst carefully placed rocks, trampling delicate moss under their iron-shod feet. The shouts of combat and the cries of the wounded, drowning out the gentle murmur of a stream. The garden, designed for quiet contemplation, could become a scene of brutal carnage in an instant. You might picture a Zen master, in a moment of grim irony, trying to explain the concept of impermanence to a rampaging soldier who is currently attempting to make off with a priceless antique stone lantern. Yes, brother, all forms are indeed transient and empty. But did you really have to take the one I just spent a week meticulously polishing? Beyond direct destruction, there was the slow, insidious creep of neglect. When monks were forced to flee their temples, when patrons were killed or their fortunes lost, when able-bodied men were conscripted for war, who was left to tend the gardens? Weeds would quickly take root, choking out the carefully cultivated moss. Sand patterns would be erased by wind and rain, never to be re-raked. Ponds would silt up, and meticulously pruned trees would grow wild and misshapen, their essential character obscured. It's a bit like stumbling upon a long-forgotten social media profile, overgrown with digital weeds, a few strange, unexpected things having taken root, and desperately in need of a dedicated curator to restore its former glory. Garden materials themselves might be repurposed out of grim necessity. Timber from fences or pavilions used for fuel or fortifications. Stones perhaps even prized up to serve as makeshift barricades or projectiles. The very fabric of the garden could be cannibalized by the voracious appetite of war. Yet, amidst this chaos and destruction, the spirit of creation and preservation often endured, sometimes in remarkable ways. This wasn't just about saving pretty scenery, it was about safeguarding cultural identity, spiritual sanctuaries, and places of profound human meaning. Monks, samurai patrons who survived, and sometimes even ordinary local people who cherished these spaces, would often undertake heroic efforts to protect what they could, and to rebuild when the storms of war finally passed. For a quirky, poignant glimpse into these desperate times, there are anecdotal accounts. Some perhaps embellished over the centuries, but reflecting a deeper truth of monks during terrifying sieges or periods of intense, localized conflict going to extraordinary lengths to protect specific, highly valued garden elements. This might involve secretly burying prized smaller stones, valuable sutra scrolls normally kept in garden pavilions, or precious tea ceremony utensils. They might even attempt to disguise or hide particularly ancient or sacred trees by strategically piling debris or mundane objects around their bases, hoping the chaos would pass them by and spare these living treasures. The resilience of nature itself also played a role. A garden, even when neglected and overgrown for decades, often retains the bones of its original design. Ancient stones remain, the contours of a pond might still be discernible, and hardy old trees, though perhaps misshapen, still stand as sentinels. The garden, in a sense, waits patiently for a time when hands can once again tend to it, when peace allows for its rediscovery and restoration, and, as history shows, that commitment to rebuilding was incredibly strong. Many of the famous gardens of Kyoto that we can still visit today were, in fact, destroyed or severely damaged during conflicts like the Onin War, only to be painstakingly and lovingly restored in the subsequent decades and centuries. The motivations behind these often massive reconstruction efforts are naturally a subject of thoughtful consideration for scholars. Historians continue to examine the driving forces behind the frequently rapid and resource-intensive reconstruction of prominent Zen temples and their revered gardens. After periods of devastating warfare was this immense effort, fueled primarily by pure spiritual devotion and an unshakable desire to restore sacred spaces and cultural touchstones. Or were there also significant political and economic considerations at play, such as reestablishing a clan's or a temple's prestige and influence, attracting renewed patronage from the powerful, and perhaps even revitalizing local economies that depended on these centers? Most likely, it was a complex tapestry woven from all these threads: spiritual necessity, cultural pride, and pragmatic socio-economic recovery. The ultimate Zen test, one might imagine, would be trying to maintain your deep inner peace and meditative calm while your meticulously raked sand patterns are being used as an impromptu latrine by a company of undisciplined Ashigru foot soldiers. It's a rather earthy thought, but it highlights the profound disconnect between the garden's ideal of pristine order and the often squalid realities of war. Yet, the enduring story of these gardens is not just one of vulnerability, but of tenacious survival and renewal. It speaks to a deep-seated human need for beauty, for peace, for spaces that elevate the spirit, even and perhaps especially, when surrounded by the ugliest manifestations of human conflict. The chaos of war could ravage the body of the garden, but its soul, its essence, often found a way to endure, carried in the memories of those who loved it, and ready to bloom again when peace allowed. That ability of a Zen garden to bloom again, to reassert its serene order even after the ravages of war, speaks not just to the inherent resilience of nature, but also to the deep, disciplined human intent that first brought it into being and then patiently, painstakingly uncoaxed it back to vibrant life, too. And for you, the samurai. This very act of creation and meticulous maintenance wasn't merely a pleasant pastime to while away the peaceful hours between campaigns, nor was it solely a method to beautify your surroundings and impress your peers. No, the garden itself, with its quiet demands and subtle teachings, could become a unique and highly effective kind of training ground, a dojo of dirt, if you will, where the very same virtues and mental fortitude demanded by Bushido, the way of the warrior, were actively cultivated and honed with every single weed patiently pulled, every stone thoughtfully settled into the earth, every branch precisely and artfully pruned. Bushido, as you know, was far more than just a set of rules for combat. It was a complex ethical and moral code emphasizing virtues like righteousness, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and unwavering loyalty. Central to this code was the relentless cultivation of inner strength, unwavering discipline, and a keen, almost preternatural awareness. And while the more obvious dojo involved the clash of Bakken and the perfecting of sword forms, the garden offered a quieter, yet no less rigorous arena for forging these essential samurai qualities. This aligns beautifully with the ideal of Bunbu Ryodo, the harmonious dual way of the martial and literary cultural arts, where refinement in one sphere enhanced prowess in the other. Consider the virtue of patience, Nintai, and perseverance. You can't rush a pine tree into an ancient, gnarled form overnight. That takes decades, sometimes centuries, of careful, incremental training. You can't hurry moss to spread its velvety carpet across a stone. It takes its own sweet, unhurried time. This slow, methodical work, waiting for seeds to germinate, for plants to mature, for the garden to settle into its intended harmony, built a deep well of patience within you, the kind of profound endurance needed to withstand a protracted siege, a long and arduous military campaign, or the slow, frustrating grind of political maneuvering. Your drill sergeant samurai, if he caught you impatiently hacking at an azalea, might just bellow. That defenseless shrubbery shows more fighting spirit and patient resolve than you do. Maggot contemplate its stoic acceptance of pruning. Then there's disciplined keiritsu and precision, the meticulous act of raking salmon patterns in a gravel garden, ensuring each line is perfectly straight or each curve flawlessly executed, demanded an extraordinary level of focus and physical control, not unlike the precision required to execute a complex sword kata or deliver a decisive cut. Pruning was not a haphazard affair. It required understanding the plant's essential nature and making precise cuts to enhance its form and vitality. Even the daily maintenance of your gardening tools, keeping them clean, sharp, and well-oiled, mirrored the disciplined care you afforded your katana and armor. This was about respecting your tools and, by extension, respecting the task at hand. Awareness Zanshin and mindfulness Heijoshin, an imperturbable mind, were perhaps the most profound gifts of garden work. To truly tend a garden, you had to be fully present. You needed to notice the subtle shift in the color of a leaf that might indicate a lack of water or nutrients, the first appearance of a destructive insect, the way the light moved across the stones at different times of day. This heightened sense of observation, this ability to be acutely aware of your surroundings, was directly transferable to the battlefield, where noticing a subtle movement in the tree line, a flicker of light on a distant helmet, or a change in the enemy's formation could mean the difference between life and death. The intense focus required for perfectly aligning rows of raked sand could be compared, in its own way, to the concentration needed for disarming a booby trap. A momentary lapse, and the desired outcome a pristine garden, or continued existence is compromised. The explosion in the garden, of course, is usually just your Zen masters deeply disappointed, yet terrifyingly calm. Sigh. Working with simple, natural materials, earth, stone, water, plants, also fostered a sense of humility and an appreciation for simplicity Konso. In a world often driven by ambition, status, and the glories of war, the quiet, unassuming work of the garden could be a powerful antidote to arrogance. It connected you to fundamental realities, to the cycles of growth and decay, teaching a respect for the natural order that transcended human hierarchies. And achieving a perfectly executed garden task, like coaxing a reluctant bonsai into a breathtaking form, might provide a quiet satisfaction as deep and meaningful as a perfectly executed sword cut in the dojo, but with considerably less resulting paperwork and fewer existential questions. Even the acceptance of impermanence, a core Zen tenet, was taught daily in the dojo of dirt. You witnessed leaves fall, flowers fade, and even the meticulously raked patterns eventually become disturbed, needing to be redone. This constant reminder of the transient nature of all things helped cultivate an acceptance of change and loss, a vital psychological tool for a warrior whose life was constantly shadowed by the possibility of death. And for a quirky, insightful tale that bridges this gap, there's a delightful, if perhaps apocryphal story, often told of a renowned and seemingly unbeatable swordsman who, when pestered by an eager young aspirant about the ultimate secret to his martial invincibility, simply led the inquirer to his exquisitely kept personal garden. He gestured not to a hidden training manual or a secret sword technique, but to a perfectly pruned bonsai tree, its form a masterpiece of disciplined artistry, and said quietly, "The underlying principles are precisely the same. Diligently remove all that is unnecessary. Fully understand the inherent form, and then act with unwavering precision and wholeheartedness." Whether true or not, the story perfectly encapsulates the idea. Of course, the explicit nature of this garden training is open to some interpretation. Scholarly discussion persists regarding the extent to which engagement in aesthetic pursuits like Zen gardening was formally and explicitly integrated into samurai training regimens as a direct method for cultivating specific martial virtues, or whether its recognized and significant benefits to discipline, awareness, and mental composure were seen more as a complementary, though highly valued and encouraged, indirect consequence of holistic personal development. Was it train with the rake to improve your sword? Or more, cultivate your spirit through the garden and your sword arm will follow? Regardless of the precise intentionality, the effect was undeniable. The calm, deliberate movements, the focused attention, the patience, and the deep connection with the natural world all contributed to a more centered, resilient, and aware samurai. The dojo of dirt demanded your full presence, and in return, it offered not just a beautiful space, but a clearer mind, a steadier hand, and a spirit more attuned to the subtle, yet powerful rhythms of existence. Qualities as essential on the path of the warrior as they were on the path of the gardener. This profound connection, where the path of the warrior and the path of the gardener became almost indistinguishable, wasn't just a theoretical ideal whispered in hushed temple corridors or hinted at in obscure Zen poetry. It was a lived reality, a tangible expression of Bunbu Ryodo for some of the most notable and formidable figures in feudal Japan. As you continue your journey through this world of disciplined serenity and structured chaos, let's pause for a moment to walk, in our imaginations at least, through a few famous plots of carefully raked sand and strategically placed stones, landscapes forever linked to the names of storied swordsmen, powerful shoguns, and artistically inclined daimyo who found in these serene spaces both a perfect mirror and a demanding crucible for their complex, often contradictory, lives. The Ashikaga shoguns of the Muromachi period, for instance, left an indelible mark on the landscape of Zen aesthetics. You might picture Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the third shogun, whose golden pavilion, or Kinkaku-ji, with its upper stories famously covered in gold leaf, shimmers in its reflection in the large pond it overlooks. While undeniably a statement of power and shogunal splendor, its surrounding garden, designed for strolling and contemplation, also incorporates Zen principles. Later, his grandson, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, the eighth shogun, presided over the flourishing of Higashiyama culture from his retirement villa, Ginkakuji, the silver pavilion. Though never actually clad in silver, its more subdued and refined aesthetic, particularly its renowned Karasansui sand garden, the sea of silver sand, with its iconic, truncated cone believed to represent Mount Fuji, became a hallmark of wabi-sabi sensibility. These weren't just rulers. They were deeply immersed in the cultural and spiritual currents of their time, and their gardens were grand stages for this engagement. Imagine Yoshimasa, perhaps weary of political strife, finding solace in the unchanging, abstract beauty of his sand sea, a universe of calm he could contemplate from his pavilion. But perhaps no figure better embodies the samurai as garden artist than Kobori Enshu, 1579-1647. Here was a man who was not only a powerful daimyo, a feudal lord in his own right, but also one of the most celebrated tea masters and influential garden designers of the early Edo period. This is a key mainstream historical fact. Enshu's work is legendary, and his aesthetic often described as kirei-sabi, a kind of elegant simplicity or refined beauty, masterfully blended the austerity of Zen with a more graceful, sometimes even subtly colorful, courtly taste. He designed numerous famous gardens, including the striking landscapes for Kanchian, a sub-temple of Nanzenji in Kyoto, which features a powerful dry garden with a tortoise and crane, island symbolism, and the grand Ninomaru Palace Garden at Nijio Castle. Also in Kyoto, a magnificent stroll garden with ponds, islands, and carefully selected stones, designed to impress visitors and provide a beautiful setting for shogunal functions. As a daimyo, Enshu understood power and strategy, but as a tea master and garden designer, he also understood the profound language of stones, water, and plants. His gardens were not just pretty, they were imbued with a sophisticated understanding of space, perspective, and symbolic meaning. You can almost feel his discerning eye, his demand for perfection in every carefully considered detail. One can imagine him discussing rock placement with the same intensity he might discuss a battle strategy. For in his world, both were arts requiring foresight, balance, and a deep understanding of underlying principles. The association of certain samurai clans with specific gardens also paints a vivid picture. The Hosokawa clan, for example, has long been linked with the enigmatic Ryoanji in Kyoto, famous for its starkly beautiful rock garden of 15 stones arranged in a sea of white gravel, a garden that seems to defy any single interpretation. While the exact origins and designer of this particular stone garden are famously debated by scholars, the Hosokawa family were significant patrons of Ryoanji Temple. Figures like Hosokawa Katsumoto, a key player in the tumultuous Onin War, were connected with the temple's early history. Later, Hosokawa Tadaoki, also known as Sansai, a distinguished warrior and a renowned disciple of the great tea master Sen no Rikyu, embodied the warrior aesthete ideal. His deep immersion in the way of tea would have undoubtedly informed his appreciation for the Zen principles underpinning garden design. It's a compelling thought. A battle-hardened warrior finding solace or intellectual challenge in the minimalist abstraction of Ryonji. It certainly beats the usual post-battle hobbies of, say, competitive arrow counting. Of course, when we speak of these powerful lords and their gardens, the question of personal involvement often arises. The precise degree of direct, hands-on involvement by influential samurai figures like Hosokawa Kasumoto or other powerful daimyo in the actual detailed design and physical layout of famous gardens attributed to their patronage, versus the primary creative agency of the highly skilled Zen monks or professional garden masters. The Senzui Kawaramono, or mountain, stream, and riverbed people they employed, remains a subject of ongoing scholarly investigation and thoughtful interpretation. Was the daimyo saying, "Put that rock there, for it symbolizes my indomitable will"? Or was it more about, "Brother Muso, work your magic. My coffers are open. Make me a garden that will inspire awe and tranquility," and perhaps subtly remind Lord Mori of his comparatively insignificant moss collection? The truth, as often, probably lies in a spectrum of collaborative effort and directive patronage. And for a quirky, charming tidbit that connects samurai reverence to specific garden elements, legend holds that a particular ancient plum tree, the Tobeume, or flying plum tree, located in the garden of Kitano Tenmangu Shrine in Kyoto, a shrine closely associated with the spirit of the scholar-poet Sugawara no Michizane, later deified as Tenjin, the god of learning, was especially revered by many educated samurai. This tree, fabled to have flown from Mishizane's home to be with him in exile, bloomed defiantly early each year. Samurai, who often valued literary skill alongside martial prowess, believed that offerings made or poems composed and left at this ancient tree could bring good fortune in their studies, inspire poetic creativity, or even, in a more hopeful vein, grant them favor in upcoming battles. It's a wonderful blend of Shinto nature reverence, Buddhist ideals of impermanence and renewal, the plum blooming in winter, and the pragmatic hopes of a warrior class. So, as you reflect on these storied swordsmen and their famous plots, you see more than just powerful men and pretty landscapes. You see a testament to the enduring human need to find meaning, beauty, and a measure of peace, even amidst the most demanding and violent of lives. These gardens were their declarations of culture, their private sanctuaries, their public statements, and perhaps in the quiet moments, their truest portraits. They left legacies not only of conquered provinces and epic battles, but also of carefully raked sand, patiently nurtured moss, and stones that still speak of timeless strength, waiting for you to listen. And so, as you listen to the timeless strength speaking from those ancient stones, to the whispers of resilience from the patiently tended moss, you begin to realize that these Zen gardens, born from the unique crucible of feudal Japan, a world of samurai honor, shogunal power, and monastic discipline, are not just historical curiosities confined to the pages of a dusty scroll or the meticulously preserved grounds of distant temples. Their echoes are all around us, their serene principles having traveled far beyond their original shores, continuing to offer pathways to peace, clarity, and a deeper connection with ourselves and the natural world in our own, often bewilderingly complex modern age. The need for that dojo of dirt, that space for cultivating inner stillness, seems just as potent now as it was for a warrior trying to find his center amidst the clang of swords. The influence of Zen garden aesthetics on Japanese culture as a whole is profound and undeniable, shaping everything from interior design and floral arrangement ikebana to painting and even everyday etiquette. But their reach extends much further. In the 20th and 21st centuries, the West, and indeed the entire globe, discovered these gardens, and their core tenets began to permeate landscape architecture, art, and even philosophical approaches to living. You see it in the minimalist trends that value simplicity and uncluttered space, in the increasing desire for homes and public areas that foster a sense of tranquility and connection to nature. It's no surprise that many of the most venerable ancient Zen gardens in Japan, particularly those concentrated in historic Kyoto, such as the iconic Ryoan-ji with its enigmatic rock arrangement, and Saiho-ji, the famed moss temple, are now designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This global recognition underscores their outstanding cultural value and enduring artistic influence, drawing millions of visitors from every corner of the earth each year, all seeking to experience their unique tranquility and timeless beauty. Why this enduring appeal? Perhaps it's because the fundamental human need for peace, for a respite from the noise and demands of daily life, is universal. Our modern battles might involve deadlines, information overload, and the relentless ping of notifications rather than clashing swords. But the stress is real, the mental fatigue palpable. The Zen garden, even in its adapted forms, offers an antidote. It reminds us of the power of simplicity in a world that constantly bombards us with complexity. It encourages mindfulness in an age of distraction. It offers a tangible connection to the natural world when many of us spend our days surrounded by concrete and screens. Can you sit still with a moss-covered rock for more than 5 minutes without an overwhelming urge to check your phone? The moss can, and has been doing so for centuries. A silent teacher in patience. You see these enduring echoes in surprising places. Consider the quirky, yet telling phenomenon of the miniature desktop Zen garden. Those little trays of fine sand, accompanied by a few symbolic stones and a tiny rake, became a popular stress relief novelty item in offices worldwide. While a far cry from the sprawling temple gardens of Kyoto, their popularity speaks volumes about a collective yearning for a moment of calm. A simple, tactile way to focus the mind and create a tiny island of order amidst workplace chaos. Even if your vast ocean is only 6 inches wide and your mountains are pebbles, the act of raking, of contemplating, however briefly, touches upon something ancient and deeply satisfying. It's a tiny nod to that same impulse that led a battle-weary samurai to seek solace in his own carefully tended space. Of course, with such widespread adoption and adaptation comes the inevitable discussion about authenticity. There is ongoing discussion among landscape architects, cultural historians, and dedicated Zen practitioners regarding the authenticity and ultimate spiritual effectiveness of modern Zen-inspired gardens created outside of their original Japanese cultural and deep religious monastic context. Can a garden designed for a corporate headquarters in New York or a suburban backyard in Sydney, however beautiful and calming, truly convey the same profound spiritual depth as a centuries-old temple garden steeped in monastic tradition? Or do these modern interpretations primarily serve as aesthetic homages and valuable spaces for general stress relief and a connection with nature, which is, of course, still a worthy goal? It's a nuanced conversation, recognizing that while the outward forms can be replicated, the deep-rooted cultural soil from which they first sprang is unique. Some modern attempts are breathtakingly successful in capturing the spirit. Others, well, they might end up as just a pile of carefully chosen rocks accompanied by a vague sense of existential angst. Yet, even if the context shifts, the core principles retain their power. The emphasis on natural materials, the beauty of asymmetry, the appreciation for imperfection and the passage of time, the creation of spaces that encourage quiet reflection. These are ideas that resonate deeply regardless of geography or creed. The spirit of wabi-sabi can be found in a weathered wooden bench, as much as in an ancient Japanese tea bowl. The practice of mindfulness can be cultivated in a small urban balcony garden, as well as in a sprawling temple ground. So, as our journey through the world of samurai and their Zen gardens draws towards its close, you carry with you not just images of historical landscapes, but an understanding of an enduring philosophy. The feudal chaos has long since faded into the mists of time. The swords of the samurai are now museum pieces, but the gardens they cherished and the Zen principles they embodied remain. They stand as a quiet testament to the human capacity to find and create beauty, order, and profound peace even in the most challenging of circumstances. The echoes of those ancient rakes in the sand, the silent contemplation of stone, the patient tending of moss, still offer us a path, a way to cultivate our own inner gardens of tranquility. A reminder that amidst the storms of life, there is always a space for stillness, for reflection, and for the enduring power of a mindful breath. And so, with that mindful breath, you feel the echoes of those ancient gardens gently settling within you, not as distinct facts or historical timelines, but as a soft, pervasive sense of calm, like the fine mist that sometimes clings to a Kyoto hillside at dawn. The journey through feudal chaos and serene landscapes begins to recede, the clash of swords and the murmur of sutras fading into a comfortable, distant hum. There is no need now to analyze the symbolism of stone, or to ponder the discipline of the samurai mind. It is enough to simply rest with the feeling of peace these timeless spaces were designed to evoke. A quiet understanding that permeates your being like the scent of pine after a gentle rain. Imagine, if you will, the softest bed of ancient moss, resilient and deeply green, cushioning your awareness as you allow yourself to drift further and further into tranquility. The sharp edges of your day, the lingering thoughts and pressing concerns, begin to blur, smoothed over by the patient, unending rhythm of waves on a distant, symbolic shore, each gentle sigh of sound a lullaby. Let the cares of your own world become like those carefully raked patterns in the sand, lines that define a momentary order, beautiful in their passing, but ultimately yielding to the gentle, inevitable erasure of oncoming. Welcome slumber. There is nothing left to do now, nothing left to solve, only the quiet embrace of this peaceful moment. The ancient gardeners understood the profound restorative power of stillness, and that same timeless invitation to deep, untroubled rest is now extended to you, a gift from centuries past. Allow your consciousness to become like clear water held within a cool, smooth stone basin, perfectly still, reflecting only the quiet darkness and the distant, gentle stars of a peaceful night sky, the enduring strength of the mountains, the quiet resilience of the bamboo swaying softly in an unseen breeze, the serene acceptance of the single falling leaf. These qualities are not ideals to strive for just now, but gentle sensations already within you, waiting to be acknowledged as you surrender ever more completely to the approaching calm. Let the profound silence of the Zen garden fill your mind, a silence that is not empty, but wonderfully full of potential, full of inherent peace, a soft, warm blanket for your thoughts as they, too, begin to settle and effortlessly drift, and finally, peacefully dream. End of script. Sweet dreams.